Gumball is a series known for its chaotic and strange nature. From explosions to the destruction of the entire city, finding a normal episode is no easy task. This video reviews 240 episodes from seasons 1 to 6 to find the most normal one of all. But stay until the end, because the final pick isn't just surprising, it completely changes how you'll see the entire show. The scoring system. Each episode gets a normality score from 1 to 10, with 1 being the least normal and 10 being the most. But what does normal really mean in the world of Gumball? In this video, normality doesn't just mean boring or plain. Instead, it measures how closely the episode could actually happen in real life without cartoon logic, superpowers, or world-ending disasters getting in the way.
The paintings! They're changing!
So here's how the scale works. 1 out of 10. Pure chaos. Episodes at this level are filled with giant monsters, strange transformations, or surreal logic that could never exist outside of Elmore. These are the kinds of stories that feel like fever dreams, fun, but as far from reality as you can get. 5 out of 10. A perfect middle ground. These episodes often start with normal situations. A lost item, a family argument, a school problem, but quickly spiral into absurdity. They reflect real life at the beginning, but cartoon exaggeration takes over. 10 out of 10. The closest Gumball ever gets to being realistic. These are episodes where the core conflict, jealousy, friendship, a school rivalry, or family drama could easily happen in our world. They might still include jokes and exaggerations, but nothing that breaks the illusion of reality. By applying this scale to all 240 episodes, we can separate the truly bizarre from the surprisingly relatable. And here's the twist. Once each season has its most normal episode, those winners are brought together in one final comparison. Which season produced the episode that feels most like something we've actually lived ourselves? That ultimate winner isn't just crowned the most normal episode of Gumball. It's proof that even in a show built on chaos, the most powerful stories are often the ones rooted in real human experiences. Episodes by season. Season 1. The DVD. Gumball and Darwin accidentally destroy a rented DVD, and what follows is one of those classic Watterson spirals, where a small problem snowballs into a complete disaster. At first, it seems like an easy fix. It's just a DVD, right? But for Gumball, nothing is ever simple. The boys try everything in their power to cover up their mistake. Their first idea? Forge a new DVD. Of course, this doesn't go smoothly. They attempt to copy the movie using whatever random supplies they can find at home, but their version looks more like a kindergarten art project than an actual disc. The absurdity grows when they even try to reenact scenes themselves, convinced they can pass it off as the original film. It's the kind of misguided optimism that defines Gumball. Failure doesn't stop him. It just inspires an even stranger plan. When forging fails, the next logical step is getting a job to pay for the damage. Watching Gumball and Darwin attempt to enter the workforce is hilariously painful. They try customer service, manual labor, and even artistic gigs, but predictably, their lack of focus and their habit of turning everything into chaos makes them terrible employees. Instead of making money, they leave a trail of frustrated bosses and ruined businesses in their wake. Meanwhile, Nicole hovers in the background, representing the voice of responsibility. And here's where the episode takes a surprising turn. At one point, Nicole shows off a burst of agility and skill with some exaggerated parkour moves. It's flashy, over the top, and totally unrealistic. While it makes for a fun gag, it reminds us that even Nicole, the responsible one, sometimes breaks the rules of what's believable. This is the main reason the episode only scores a 5 out of 10 on the normality scale. The foundation of the story, kids messing up a rental and panicking, is incredibly relatable. Who hasn't feared the wrath of returning something broken? But the execution, with absurd solutions and unrealistic stunts, pushes it right back into classic Gumball territory. What makes the DVD so memorable, though, isn't just the absurdity. It's the core idea that a small mistake can feel like the end of the world when you're a kid. That anxiety of hiding your errors, of scrambling to fix something before an adult finds out, is an experience almost everyone can connect with. It's this blend of relatability and surreal comedy that defines Gumball at its best.
Sure, when you ask me like a man. I am a man! Really? Because right now you sound like a mouse whose parachute won't open.
So while it doesn't reach the highest levels of normality, it earns its place as an important early episode. It shows us both sides of the show, the relatable childhood panic and the complete meltdown into cartoon absurdity. The Date. Gumball's so-called date with Penny is one of those episodes that starts with a familiar premise: young love, nervous excitement, a boy preparing for his big moment, and then takes a hard left turn straight into the bizarre. Gumball shows up at Penny's house expecting romance, maybe a sweet dinner, or at least some awkward teenage conversation. Instead, he walks straight into a funeral. Not just any funeral either. It's the memorial service for Penny's beloved pet tarantula, Mr. Cuddles. The mood is somber, the family is in mourning, and poor Gumball, clueless, underdressed, and unprepared, couldn't be more out of place. From the very first moment, the tension is both hilarious and painfully relatable. Who hasn't dreaded making a terrible first impression on their crush's family? At first, Gumball tries to blend in, offering condolences and attempting to act respectful. But of course, he can't help being Gumball. His awkwardness bubbles to the surface, and every attempt to say the right thing makes things worse. He stumbles, he fidgets, and at one point he ends up upsetting Penny's sister, making her glare at him like he's the villain of the day. Penny's dad, always protective and suspicious, is less than impressed too. What should have been a chance to win the family over quickly spirals into disaster. But here's the twist. In true Watterson fashion, Gumball sees an opportunity to redeem himself. When he discovers that Mr. Cuddles might not actually be dead, he decides to prove it and save the day. The only problem? Tarantulas aren't exactly gentle creatures. In the chaos that follows, Gumball ends up with more than a few battle scars. Specifically, around 150 tarantula bites. It's over the top, absurd, and exactly the kind of cartoon exaggeration that makes the episode unforgettable. On the normality scale, this episode earns a 7 out of 10. Why so high? Because at its core, the story is incredibly relatable. Strip away the tarantulas, and it's just about a kid trying, and failing, to impress the family of his crush. The awkward tension, the pressure to be liked, the fear of messing up, that's something almost everyone has felt. What brings the score down are the extreme elements. Most of us will never sit through a funeral for a giant spider, nor will we walk away covered in venomous bite marks. The cartoon exaggeration pushes the situation from realistic to absurd, but it never loses sight of the emotional core, the desperate, messy attempts to prove yourself worthy in someone else's eyes. And that's the brilliance of The Date. It takes a universal teenage fear, messing up in front of your crush's family, and dresses it up in the most bizarre, Gumball-style packaging possible. It makes us laugh at the chaos while also cringing in recognition. Because even though we've never been bitten by 150 tarantulas, we've all felt the sting of embarrassment when everything goes wrong at exactly the wrong time. The Third. At first glance, The Third seems like one of the most ordinary premises in the entire series. Gumball and Darwin, best friends as always, find themselves bored. After years of doing everything together, school, video games, ridiculous adventures, they realize they've run out of things to say and do. Their routine has become so predictable that even they feel trapped in it. And so begins their quest to find a third best friend. It's a scenario that almost anyone can relate to. Friendships, especially when they're intense and all-consuming, sometimes need space, variety, or new connections. But Gumball, being Gumball, doesn't just look for someone else to hang out with casually. He treats the search like a talent show. He and Darwin interview classmates, test out candidates, and explore what life would be like if someone new entered their perfectly balanced duo. Things take a turn when Tobias enters the picture. Tobias, with his confident attitude and endless energy, quickly bonds with Darwin. The two click almost instantly, laughing, playing, and sharing inside jokes while Gumball watches from the sidelines. And for Gumball, that's unbearable. His best friend, the person he relies on for every adventure, is suddenly drifting towards someone else. This is where the episode becomes more than just silly comedy. It taps into something deeply human, jealousy. Gumball isn't just afraid of being left out. He's afraid of being
Place
replaced.
where I'm not pressured by society to be beautiful.
You don't look that different.
I haven't taken off my makeup yet. How about you?
His insecurity grows until he spirals into outrageous antics to win Darwin back. The most famous of these moments is, of course, when Gumball literally sets himself on fire and pedals a bike at insane speeds, convinced that extreme stunts will prove his worth as the better best friend. It's absurd, it's dangerous, and it's the perfect exaggeration of how desperation feels when you think you're losing someone important. But here's what makes the third stand out on the normality scale. Beneath all the flames and chaos, the emotions are painfully real. Most kids, and adults too, have experienced that sting of jealousy when a friend seems closer to someone else. We've all wondered if we're being forgotten, if we're not enough, or if the bond we treasure might not be as unshakable as we thought. That's why the episode scores a 9 out of 10 for normality. The only reason it doesn't hit a perfect 10 is because of the cartoon exaggerations. No real kid is going to torch themselves or pedal like a rocket to earn loyalty. Still, the emotional stakes couldn't be more relatable. Gumball's desperation mirrors the way insecurity can make us act irrational, over the top, and even self-destructive. His actions might make us laugh, but the truth underneath them is powerful. Sometimes we push ourselves to extremes just to feel valued. In the end, the resolution is simple but meaningful. Gumball realizes that friendship isn't about flashy stunts or proving superiority. It's about trust, understanding, and accepting that relationships evolve. Darwin doesn't abandon him, and Tobias doesn't replace him. Instead, Gumball learns, if only briefly, that there's room for more than one person in Darwin's life, and that sharing a friend doesn't mean losing them. That's why The Third is so close to being the most normal episode in the entire series. Strip away the cartoon absurdities, and what you're left with is a story about jealousy, insecurity, and the fragile balance of friendship. It's messy, it's emotional, and it's exactly the kind of thing that feels real even in a world as bizarre as Elmore. Season 2, The Banana. Few episodes capture the spirit of schoolyard drama as well as The Banana. It all begins with something ridiculously small. Gumball finds Darwin's pen chewed up and immediately points the finger at Banana Joe. It's the kind of misunderstanding that could have been cleared up with a single calm conversation. But this is Elmore. And in Gumball's world, misunderstandings are never small. They explode into chaos. The accusation sparks what feels like a chain reaction. Banana Joe, never one to back down, responds with pranks of his own, and soon the entire situation turns into a full-on battle of wits. What started as a simple, "Did you bite my pen?" becomes a cycle of retaliation. Pranks, tricks, setups, and counterattacks. Each attempt to get even just makes things worse, until the original problem, one ruined pen, is completely forgotten. What makes this episode so much fun is how perfectly it mirrors real-life conflicts, especially among kids. Tiny problems often grow into massive feuds, not because of what actually happened, but because of pride, stubbornness, and the refusal to let things go. The Wattersons thrive in this kind of environment, and Gumball in particular cannot resist the temptation to escalate. For him, admitting he might be wrong feels impossible. Instead, he doubles down, dragging Darwin into the feud and pushing the rivalry with Banana Joe to absurd levels. The pranks themselves are classic Gumball, elaborate, over-the-top, and hilariously unnecessary. From harmless tricks to outrageous schemes, the back and forth feels less like two kids solving a problem and more like two armies locked in an eternal war. The classroom becomes their battlefield, and the collateral damage keeps piling up. Teachers, classmates, and even objects around them get caught in the crossfire. And yet, underneath the chaos, the core conflict is incredibly relatable. Who hasn't blown a small misunderstanding way out of proportion? Who hasn't felt the urge to get even instead of simply moving on? That's why The Banana earns a strong 8 out of 10 on the normality scale. The premise, an accusation over a chewed pen, could easily happen in any school. The way it spirals into revenge warfare is exaggerated, but the emotional logic behind it feels real. Where it loses points, of course, is in the cartoon physics and absurd escalation. There's one moment in particular that knocks the score down. Banana Joe's eye literally pops out in the middle of the madness. That single gag reminds us that no matter how grounded the story begins, Gumball will always find a way to tip it into surreal territory. Still, the brilliance of the banana lies in how it balances relatability with absurdity. On one hand, it's a story about pride, stubbornness, and the refusal to admit mistakes, universal themes everyone can understand. On the other, it's a slapstick comedy with cartoon fruit losing body parts. It's this duality that makes the episode stand out. By the end, the feud burns itself out, leaving behind the same silly truth as always. The problem was never really about the pen. It was about respect, ego, and the way kids, and sometimes adults, let small conflicts snowball into chaos. The banana takes a tiny seed of a problem and grows it into one of the funniest examples of misunderstanding-driven storytelling in the series. And that's exactly why it sits near the top of the normality ranking. It shows us that even in Elmore, the most ridiculous situations often start with something as ordinary as a chewed-up pen. Season 3. The Man. In The Man, Richard clashes with Granny JoJo's new boyfriend, Louie, turning their rivalry into a contest over who is more of a man. The challenges range from silly beard growing and strength tests to emotional openness, mixing absurd comedy with genuine themes. Beneath the slapstick lies Richard's insecurity and fear of being replaced, while Louie shows a calmer, healthier version of masculinity. On the normality scale, it scores a 6 out of 10. The family tension is very relatable, but the exaggerated gags push it far from reality. Still, the episode stands out as a funny yet revealing look at Richard's vulnerability. The Egg. In The Egg, Nicole pressures the Wattersons to act normal when meeting the respectable Parham family. Despite her efforts to coach their manners, Richard's laziness, Gumball's chaos, Darwin's distractions, and Anais' blunt honesty sabotage everything. The harder they try to fit in, the more their eccentricities stand out, until Nicole completely snaps and punches the other mother. The episode earns a 5 out of 10 on the normality scale. The premise of impressing another family is very relatable, but the over-the-top antics and cartoon violence push it into the surreal. Still, its deeper message resonates. Family isn't about perfection, but about embracing each other's quirks. Season 4. The Signature. In The Signature, Richard's immaturity reaches a whole new level. Feeling insecure about his place in the family, he decides to play a trick on Louie, Granny JoJo's kind and gentle boyfriend. Richard sneaks adoption papers into something Louie is signing, essentially making Louie his new dad. It's a ridiculous premise that quickly spirals out of control. Once Louie unknowingly signs, the family dynamic becomes a whirlwind of chaos. Richard takes the adoption far too seriously, demanding fatherly attention from Louie and treating him as if he's the head of the household. Nicole, already exasperated by Richard's antics, finds herself caught in the middle of a bizarre tug-of-war between her husband and her mother's partner. As the situation escalates, the episode goes off the rails in true Gumball fashion. The house literally explodes in one scene, and Nicole transforms into a monstrous, alien-like xenomorph out of pure rage and frustration. These wild exaggerations are funny and visually entertaining, but they pull the story far away from anything resembling normal family drama. On the normality scale, The Signature earns only a 2 out of 10. The core idea, family insecurity and complicated relationships with a parent's new partner, is realistic and relatable. But the execution is so exaggerated, with explosions, alien mutations, and nonsensical legal loopholes, that it ends up being one of the least normal episodes in the entire series. Still, it highlights an important theme: Richard's desperate need for validation and belonging, even if he pursues it in the most absurd ways possible. And in that sense, beneath the chaos, there's still a sliver of humanity hidden in the madness. Season 5. The Potato. In The Potato, Darwin's natural kindness takes center stage. When he realizes that his friend Idaho is literally a living potato, Darwin becomes self-conscious about eating French fries, mashed potatoes, or anything made from spuds. To him, it feels like a betrayal. almost like eating a relative in front of Idaho. His solution? He decides to give up potatoes entirely. At first, it seems like a thoughtful gesture.
Right fills with pure delight.
But soon, Darwin's good intentions spiral into absurdity. The more he avoids potatoes, the more obsessed he becomes with the idea. His cravings start to play tricks on him, and before long he begins hallucinating. Everywhere he looks, he sees potato imagery, fries turning into eyes, mashed potatoes whispering his name, Idaho's face appearing in the strangest places. The episode leans into surreal comedy here, exaggerating Darwin's guilt until it feels like he's haunted by his own conscience. This setup is a perfect example of a classic Gumball misunderstanding. Nobody ever asked Darwin to stop eating potatoes. Idaho doesn't even seem to care. But Darwin, overthinking as usual, creates a problem out of nothing and then tortures himself trying to fix it. On the normality scale, the potato earns a 6 out of 10. The emotional core is relatable. Everyone has experienced guilt about accidentally offending a friend or about making a small issue bigger than it really is. But the exaggerated hallucinations and surreal imagery push it away from reality. Still, the message lands. Sometimes, in trying too hard to protect others, we end up hurting ourselves. And often, the problem only existed in our imagination. The news. This episode dives into one of Elmore's strangest institutions, its local news station. What should be a source of information and order quickly becomes pure nonsense. From the very beginning, the broadcast spirals out of control with bizarre segments and chaotic anchors. Among the highlights, we see a spider-related fire that is reported with almost no concern, celebrity feuds treated as breaking news, and a weather forecast so wrong it feels like the meteorologist is inventing things on the spot. Instead of grounding Elmore in reality, the news only adds to the town's sense of absurdity. The humor works because it parodies real-world news, exaggerating the way media sometimes sensationalizes the ridiculous. But in terms of normality, it doesn't get very far. There's no relatable family conflict or grounded storyline here, just a string of surreal sketches pretending to be journalism. On the normality scale, the news earns only a 1 out of 10. It's entertaining, it's chaotic, and it fits perfectly in Gumball's world, but it couldn't be further from a normal everyday experience. Season 6, The Silence. In The Silence, the story tackles something surprisingly simple. What happens when two best friends run out of things to say? For Gumball and Darwin, who usually spend every waking moment together talking non-stop, finishing each other's sentences, and turning even the dullest day into chaos, the sudden emptiness is almost unbearable. At first, it feels like a minor hiccup. Maybe they're just tired. Maybe it's a quiet day. But as the silence stretches on, it becomes awkward, then unsettling, and finally downright painful. The two sit together in class, walk home, and even hang out in their usual spots. But the natural flow of conversation that defines their friendship has vanished. For Gumball, this is a crisis. If he and Darwin can't talk, what does that mean about their bond? The episode explores the fear of distance in relationships. Anyone who's had a best friend or a close sibling can relate. Silence can feel like rejection, even when it isn't. Gumball starts to spiral, overthinking the situation, and Darwin, usually the more patient one, becomes equally uncomfortable. Their shared discomfort quickly turns into a rift, and what begins as a pause in conversation transforms into a full-on falling out. Of course, this is still Gumball, so the surreal comedy isn't far behind. Their awkward silence snowballs into bizarre scenarios, with exaggerated visuals and side gags that push the story beyond realism. At one point, the lack of conversation feels so unnatural that it seems to distort reality itself, as if the universe of Elmore can't function without their constant chatter. Yet beneath the weirdness, the heart of the episode is incredibly relatable. It's about insecurity, about questioning the strength of a friendship when it suddenly doesn't feel effortless anymore. The exaggerated chaos works as a metaphor. Silence can feel heavier than words, almost like the world itself is crumbling when you fear you've lost your connection to someone who matters most. On the normality scale, The Silence earns a 7 out of 10. The core story, two friends feeling anxious after running out of things to say, is one of the most realistic and human premises the show has ever tackled. What lowers the score are the surreal gags and absurd exaggerations that layer on top of the central conflict. Still, it remains one of the most grounded stories in the series, because at its core, it's not about monsters or chaos. It's about the fragile balance of friendship. In the end, the silence reminds us that even the closest bonds can feel uncertain at times, and that silence doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship. It can simply be another stage, one that teaches us how to value presence, not just words. Final ranking. The 6 highest scoring episodes are compared one last time. 6th place, The Signature, Season 4. 2 over the top, included only because the rest of its season is even worse. 5th place, The Man, Season 3. Relatable core story, but the macho challenges make it unrealistic. 4th place, The Potato, Season 5. A classic misunderstanding, but hallucinations and gags drag it down. 3rd place, The Silence, Season 6. A friendship crisis story that's relatable, but still filled with Gumball's trademark weirdness. 2nd place, The Banana, Season 2. A pure school drama with a misunderstanding at its heart, but it loses the top spot thanks to Banana Joe's eye popping out. The Most Normal Episode. The crown for the most normal episode of The Amazing World of Gumball goes to The Third from Season 1. Out of all 240 episodes reviewed, this one stands apart not because of explosions or surreal comedy, but because of how grounded its story really is. At its core, The Third is about jealousy and friendship, a theme so universal that almost every kid, and plenty of adults, can relate to it. Gumball and Darwin, inseparable best friends, suddenly feel like they've run out of fun together. In an effort to shake things up, they search for a third member of their group. But when Tobias steps into the picture, things quickly shift. Darwin enjoys the novelty of a new friend, and Gumball, terrified of being left behind, spirals into jealousy. What makes this episode so powerful is that it strips away all the supernatural bells and whistles. There are no monsters lurking in Elmore, no apocalyptic disasters tearing the town apart, no bizarre mutations changing the characters into unrecognizable forms. Instead, the conflict is entirely emotional, based on feelings kids face every day: fear of being replaced, fear of losing your best friend, and the irrational things we sometimes do to keep people close to us. Yes, Gumball's jealousy takes him to absurd lengths, setting himself on fire, pedaling wildly, and trying to prove his worth with outrageous antics. But beneath the exaggeration lies a story about insecurity that anyone can recognize. And unlike other episodes where chaos resets everything, The Third ends with a simple but meaningful resolution. Gumball and Darwin realize that friendship isn't about exclusivity, it's about trust and the ability to share. That's what earns this episode a nearly perfect score on the normality scale. It doesn't rely on cartoon logic to move the plot forward. Instead, it leans on emotional logic, the kind of messy, awkward feelings that drive real-life relationships. The laughs come not from surreal imagery, but from the painful honesty of Gumball's desperation to keep his best friend by his side. So while Elmore is usually a place of constant chaos, The Third shows us something different, that the most engaging stories don't always need wild adventures or absurd twists. Sometimes, all it takes is the very real fear of losing a friend to remind us that Gumball, beneath all the strangeness, is still a mirror of our own lives. It's awkward, it's emotional, and it has real consequences. And that's why The Third stands as the most normal and maybe one of the most relatable episodes in the entire series. And that's it. The most normal episode of The Amazing World of Gumball. Sometimes the wildest show can teach us the most relatable lessons. Do you agree with The Third as the winner? Or do you have another pick? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more Gumball deep dives every week.